In this video, I'm going to talk about the nature of rationality and why being rational is not necessarily a positive thing, given the world that we find ourselves in. So, to start off, what does it mean to be rational? In this case, I don't use rationality in the broad, common use of the term. I use it in a technical sense, specifically, as in instrumental rationality, which is the capacity to choose the most efficient and logical means toward achieving one's ends. In other words, given the set of games that constitute our lives, what would it look like to act rationally? And would that way of acting be conducive to a good life? To answer this question, we need to bring ourselves into the context of what the real world entails for human beings. And for that, we need to understand evolution. Please bear with me. We will return to the rationality shortly. Human beings, like all animals, are products of evolution. In any environment with scarce resources, the traits that make survival and reproduction more likely become more common over time. Early evolution worked mainly through natural selection, meaning that those less fit simply died more often. But with the emergence of sexual reproduction, another layer appeared, which is sexual selection. Survival alone was no longer enough. One also had to attract mates. And from that point onward, being fit for survival carried additional costs. But the underlying goal remained the same, which is the proliferation of genes. Fast forward to humanity, and we find extraordinarily complex organisms competing in subtle ways, through intelligence, social influence, creativity, resource control, and cooperation. Our moral intuitions, our ambitions, and even our aesthetic sensibilities are shaped by this evolutionary game. Every part of our bodies and brains has evolved to help us survive and proliferate in continuing and more complex environments. But how does this all connect with rationality? In the context of a game or a series of games, the rational action is that which helps the actor win as much as possible without compromising their ability to keep playing. For example, if we have a game of gaining wealth, one strategy would be to get educated and then climb the career ladder. Another strategy may be to rob your local bank. In the short term, the second strategy might give you higher returns, but it comes at a significant cost. If you get caught, you get thrown in jail for many years, and you don't get to keep the wealth that you stole. Furthermore, you reduce your chances at mating success or any sort of social success because your reputation will be that of a self-interested criminal. Following this train of thought, it is easy to see how moral frameworks may evolve and why we feel so strongly about them. Morality is what guarantees that, for the most part, if we play fair, our neighbor will play fair as well. But this is where the problem arises. You see, morality and all sorts of codes of conduct are situated within the evolutionary framework that I detailed before. They exist in a world that has a series of games, all of which aim toward the broader aim of the all-encompassing game of survival and proliferation. And let me make this very clear. I'm not making a moral judgment about human worth or value here. I'm describing how evolution operates mechanically and what it implies when we extend rational thinking into that framework. It is a fact that some genes are very well adapted for survival and proliferation in certain environments, some are very poorly adapted, and some fall somewhere in the middle. Inevitably, within the normal distribution of a huge population of people, there will be a minority on one end of the spectrum that have so poorly adapted genes that they essentially cannot compete. Whether that is because those genes hinder their survivability, like genetically caused diseases, or whether it is because those genes hinder their ability to attract mates or proliferate their genes in other ways, the outcome is the same. I don't want to give an actual description of such a person because I am aware that some viewers might take the description as a personal offense, and also because even though I am not making a moral claim about human value, I am aware that some people will take it as such. You know, it is nice to think that everyone has something to contribute to this world, that everyone can somehow find fulfillment. But if we take the evolutionary game seriously, and we understand the fact that whether we like it or not, we are made with the desires and functions built in from that game, then it becomes clear that at least some people will just have such a bad hand that they will have no hope of ever winning. And so, from a purely rational perspective, what should an actor do if they find themselves in that situation? As a being with the same evolutionary interests as everyone else, what would be your best strategy for this game, given that your genes are too maladaptive to win whilst following the rules? Well, from the perspective of game theory, we might say that, rationally speaking, your only real option is to break the rules. I mean, imagine if you were forced to play a game of Monopoly, but you were specifically restricted from buying any property simply by virtue of the rules. You might say that you would simply stop playing, but here is the kicker. What if you were born with a natural desire to win that game? Now things become very different, right? Because now you have only two real options. You can't just quit the game because you already have a natural interest in winning it. But at the same time, it is literally impossible for you to win while following the rules, because you are prevented from buying any property. So now you only have two options: either follow the rules and suffer forever through no fault of your own, or break the rules in hopes of making some sort of gain. And this is not just one way of playing the game. It is literally the only way of playing the game from the standpoint of that actor, in such a way that you will have even the slightest chance of ever winning. In the real world, you can imagine what the parallel might be. If someone is given the worst genetic hand, his only options in the evolutionary game may just be to suffer, to die, or to cheat. And from the perspective of pure rationality, cheating would be objectively the best option for them. I don't want to get too graphic here, but I think you can imagine what cheating may look like in our evolutionary picture. And yes, this way of thinking is extremely dark and dangerous. And this is why I reached the conclusion that I did, which is that merely being rational is actually not a good idea in itself. We need to embrace other non-rational or even irrational traits if we are to avoid ethical monstrosities. This is arguably why having some sort of religious conviction in a community is very helpful. Because in some cases, not many, but a substantial amount, it might be actually logical to commit atrocities from the perspective of an individual actor, and thus having some sort of organization, some sort of moral authority that governs the community as a whole is very helpful in stopping these sorts of monstrosities, or even just small transgressions like stealing food or money. And you might not like religion or the idea that organized religion may be necessary, but if you don't have religion, you should at least have some sort of replacement of it that functions in this social way. And arguably, this is what things like shame and what we call a conscience helps with. Because if people naturally feel bad about transgressing, they might not make the rational choice from an individual perspective of actually committing crimes or doing immoral things in order to make gains in the evolutionary game. Thank you for watching. If you want to support the channel, please subscribe and like this video, and head over to Substack to subscribe there as well. Thank you.